Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I will call the September 20th, 2023 Select Board meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. No changes to the agenda. And I'm going to be chairing the meeting tonight because Dawn is participating remotely. And Matt is also on remotely. Thanks, Erica. 2 announcements.
Thank you. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. We have some committee vacancies, and at this point, we have them currently for the Council on Aging for 1 seat, Cultural Council for 2 seats, the Real Estate Assessment Committee for 1 seat, and the Tree Advisory Committee. And the deadline for applications for those groups is next Wednesday, September 27th at noon. The names of the applicants will be read at the board meeting, and if they want to, will be read at the board meeting on October 4th and October 11th. On the 18th, the applicants can introduce themselves and review their applications, and the board will make committee appointments then. Additionally, the board is accepting applications for the Town Council Study Committee, and those applications are due Monday, October 2nd. The Finance Committee is holding its public hearing tomorrow, Thursday, September 21st at 4 p.m. here in this room at the community room for Fairgrounds Road. It's a hybrid meeting, so people can also come on remotely. And this is the FinCom's public hearing to review the warrant articles for the November 7th special town meeting. We also have some informational sessions scheduled for the short-term rental articles that are on the November 7th special town meeting warrant. Those are going to be held remotely, and those are scheduled for Thursday, October 5th at 4:30 and Thursday, October 12th at 5:30. And please check out on the town website for information as to how to register or attend those informational sessions. We'll have a panel and a moderator, and the outreach is going out in multi languages, and this would be a good opportunity for them to ask any sort of scenario questions that they might have if they have concerns or questions about what the articles are intended to do or what their impact might be. Lastly, I think this announcement came in. Is Roberto going to talk? He's online. Okay, so Roberto, you want to give an update about these vaccine clinics, which sounds like they are not quite happening the way it's outlined in the agenda.
Yes, so basically it's a real update. I wanted to give an update that the September 23rd clinic is actually canceled, not because of anything we did as a town or even Cataldo, who is our agent, did as the business, but because the new formulation of the vaccine is not available yet. So as of right now, we had to cancel the 9/23 one and have registration open for the October 14th one. So please go to the Town of Nantucket website under the COVID page so that you can sign up for a spot there. However, the big change that we did have compared to the previous COVID clinics is that the new vaccine is not state funded. So if you have an insurance, if you have your insurance card, please bring it with you so that Cataldo can bill the insurance, but no one will be turned away due to lack of payment. And I think that's really it. Please stay tuned. And if you were signed up for the clinic for the 23rd that got canceled, please go back to the website and sign up again for a later clinic. And that should be it for now.
Roberto, our agenda says October 21st, and I think you said October 14th.
Yeah, just give me just a moment to confirm the date.
Okay, thank you.
On the announcement, it said, I think October 14th is the replacement date for this week. And then there's also one on the 21st.
Okay, so both the 14th and the 21st, and then again on November 18th
Correct.
is the schedule. Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Correct. Yes, the 14th is the replacement for the one that we had to cancel for this Saturday.
Great. Select board announcements or comments?
I have two comments, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
We talk a lot about COVID, but I'd also remind everyone to take their regular flu shot. It can be quite devastating, and we've kind of forgot about that in the last few years, but that's as important as your COVID shot. The other thing I'd like to congratulate the town. We did survive the hurricane, and fortunately, our scallops also survived the hurricane because we had several people and boaters come out and help them that had washed up on the shore. And that was typical of Nantucket, of the community getting together. But I really want to emphasize two women that were really the leaders, Tara Riley, our town biologist, and Samantha Danette from the Scalp Association. If it wasn't for those two, that never would have happened. They organized it and they led it. And I think the town owes them a big thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Sorry, I forgot to acknowledge Jeff. I think Jeff wants to maybe piggyback on what Malcolm said.
Yes. Good evening, Jeff Carlson, Natural Resources Director, and that's a perfect segue. So thank you, Malcolm. I was actually going to come and provide a little update on the scallop seed stranding that happened after Hurricane Lee. Tara was able to finally crunch all of the numbers today, and it looks like we returned about 6.6 million seed scallops back to the harbor. To translate that up in volume a little bit, if you scale them up for size, Tara knows how to do that. So we go from her numbers that if we had every scallop that we put back in survive, it would turn out to be about 19,000 bushels of adult scallops. So for comparative purposes, the last time we harvested 10,000 bushels of scallops was 2018. We haven't had a harvest that high. So 100% survivorship is almost double our best harvest of the last 5 years. And that's just the stuff that made it onto the beach. I think it was really well put by her that hopefully there was more in the water that made it to the beach. So there should be a lot out there, but I know we wanted to especially thank Tara and Samantha from the Shellfish Association for really getting it organized. We were on the beach for about half a day on Sunday, and total between the two locations had just over 100 volunteers that came out on a day's notice. A number of boaters that worked together to ferry scallops off to a different boat to then put it out in deep water. But our volunteers were a really diverse group that aged from age 6 to however old Carl Sherlin is. I don't want to guess because he'll yell at me later for it if I do. But it was a really nice array to see. It wasn't just fishermen. We had Boy Scouts out there that were there for community service time. We had people that were just interested. We had 3 people that were just walking down the beach to go for a beach walk and stayed for almost 3 hours just to help out because they thought it would be a nice thing to do. So I think what we said to one of the newspapers at the time was it was truly a Nantucket event for one of the most Nantucket-y things that there is. And we're really grateful that everyone turned out, and hopefully that will be the only one of the season and the only one of this kind of significance. So we just wanted to get a thank you out to everybody.
Double it up. That's great. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah. I'd like to just add to the short-term rental informational sessions to say that this year, the special town meeting warrant is being translated into Spanish and Portuguese for the first time ever, and will be available online in all 3 languages, including English. And I really appreciate town staff taking on that as a new effort for multilingual communication in the community and engagement in our public process. And then the only other thing I wanted to say is I've noticed this summer, particularly in the last few weeks, a trend of people using the bike paths as auxiliary parking for work trucks and other parking. And I noticed it and it bothered me, but yesterday it really bothered me when it was school dismissal time and our children were having to step out in the road on Bartlett Road because there was a truck parked on the bike path. And I just want to remind the community that bike paths are not parking lots, and they are intended for passage of people on foot, on bike, with strollers, et cetera. And safety is important, that they be accessible to everyone. So just a quick reminder of that. Do we have any follow-up comments from prior select board meetings? None. And public comment.
Curtis Barnes, this is a compliment. I saw the town announcement online today about the COVID cancellation. I went right on, and you're correct. The makeup is October 14. I signed up right away. So that is the new date, and thank you very much for making that available.
Thank you, Curtis. Online, Campbell Sutton.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, super. I just had a comment. I understand there's been some discussion about the Rotary at the Nobodier Farm and Milestone Road, which I think is a great idea. But I was thinking it might be nice to get a three-way stop in there sooner than when the reality of this roundabout will come. My thinking again is similar to when I proposed it for Bartlett and Surfside, in that it's becoming a dangerous intersection, in that the line can be so long in the mornings with people trying to get out of Nobodier Farm Road that they start to bolt out, and that's whether they have a truck with a trailer behind them or they're just a vehicle. Everyone's trying to get to work. I understand that. I just think it might be a step, a preliminary step to the phase that comes next, because the next phase obviously has to go to town meeting, and then design and approval and blah, blah. And you're not going to start it in the middle of summer. So I'm thinking that something wouldn't start until next fall if it's approved, et cetera. And even if you just started like after December 4th, when the light boards are done for the sewer development that's happening on Surfside Road, and then you could have light boards, 100 yards or what have you, whatever is legal, on Milestone Road, sort of announcing to slow down. There's a stop ahead. I also felt, it came to me when that poor boy, excuse me, lost his life on his motorcycle, that if he had to stop on Milestone Road at Nobodier Farm, that he wouldn't have been going 130 miles an hour, hopefully, within the short distance between where that stop would have been and where his accident was. Sorry for breaking up there. So that's one of my thoughts. And the other one that I had was on Town Government Study Committee that I was a part of at the time. And I had done quite a bit of research on all the towns across Massachusetts, types of governments they had chosen, and the related to the population that the towns had. And at the time, the 2020 census was delayed considerably. So we were not able to get the numbers on that for what the actual population of Nantucket was. I know, we all think there's, 17 to 20,000 people, but they're not all registered to vote. And there was only 9,420 or somewhere in that neighborhood registered to vote. And in order to consider all four types of governance available to towns in Massachusetts, you have to have over 12,000 people. And at the time, we did not have, proof that we had that until after the 2020 census came out, which was why I strongly suggested that, one, it was more than our scope. If you look at the mandate for the Town Study Committee, as given by the town meeting, voters at town meeting, but that we really needed to wait and get that population and find out what our real options were before we made a choice. So that was what I wanted to let you know on the information that I had gathered. So just to add that in as part of the reason that we didn't come up and say, pick one particular type when we didn't know what type we actually had available to us. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Not seeing anyone online. Okay. No new business. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. Any questions on pending contracts?
Matt, so moved.
Second,
Okay. All those in favor, that's for all four. All those in favor by roll call, Don Holgate,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay. Citizen departmental committee requests and reports. The housing office has 2 items. Tucker, are you ready?
Yes, Madam Chair, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. So I guess I might talk about them together here. But as the board knows, it is the municipality that makes a request to the state for a local preference when we are seeking how the 80% AMI units are allocated in a lottery when they are included on our subsidized housing inventory. And typically, local preference would allow for the 70% of those units to go to 4 categories. People who live in the town, people who work in the town, people who have children who attend school in the town, and municipal employees of the town. That is what constitutes the local preference. And so in the normal course, we always would seek to have that awarded or granted by the appropriate state agency. It more or less helps to ensure that the housing we are creating is going to locals and at the same time complying with fair housing laws and the lottery system that is prescribed. We are working with 2 developers on seeking what we're calling special local preference. We've had discussion with the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities about this concept. It is new. There is not a guarantee that they will approve it, but they understand the logic of why we are proposing it. And in the case of 31 Fairgrounds Road, Housing Nantucket, the project sponsor, is supportive of what we are doing. And that is, we are seeking for, in that case, 50% of the 70% to be exclusively directed to municipal employees. So one of the 4 categories. In addition, we are asking that those units not only get directed in that manner at the initial fill up, but when they turn over time, that they are continued to be directed to municipal employees. Normally, local preference only applies to the initial fill up. Furthermore, in this case, we are asking that some of the other income restricted units above 80% AMI be similarly designated for municipal employees. In this particular project, the 110% AMI units and the 150% AMI units, we are seeking 3 in each of those categories be designated in this way at initial occupancy and again over time. Normally, EOHLC would not opine on units above 80% AMI, but because in this rental project, they all apply, count on our subsidized housing inventory, we recognize that they have an opinion about the over 80% AMI units. So we are seeking the board's consent and approval for seeking both the basic local preference and this special local preference request. In the case of the other project, Surfside Crossing, 39 of those units are restricted at the 80% area median income. That is a ownership project, so we're only talking about those particular units in this case. The agency is different. It is going to MassHousing, who is the subsidizing agency for that project, and the developers have agreed to seek 6 of those units be designated toward municipal employees only in the manner that I just described. With that, I will turn it over for questions.
Any questions from the board? Dawn or Matt?
No, I think this is great.
Okay, the pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve?
Okay, so Eric is asking that we have separate motions.
Motion to approve the first one?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Don Holgate.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb.
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Aye.
And myself, I'll vote aye. That passes unanimously. And on the second for 31 Fairgrounds, is
Again, motion to approve?
there a second?
Second.
Okay, second from Tom on the motion by roll call, Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Don Holgate. And I vote aye. That's unanimous. Okay, thank you, Tucker.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, and Libby on item number 3, where do we want to? Should we have
So,
John?
I would turn it over to John, but just, while he's coming on, the intro to this, I guess, would be that often, well, not often, all home rule petitions get reviewed by Senate and or House Counsel. And, in this case of Article 83, which was approved at the 2023 town meeting, it's basically a rewrite of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission Special Act. They have come back with some pretty substantial language changes, not substantive, but a lot of technical wording changes, I think. So John has reviewed it and I think is prepared to give you perhaps an overview.
John? John, you muted.
There you go. I've gone through all of the changes that have been proposed by Senate Counsel. They are all, the intent is to conform the special act to the way those special acts are typically worded. The Senate Counsel has particular nomenclature and the structure of the various sections of the act. But again, it is, in my opinion, fulfilling the intent of the original article as it was passed at town meeting. And I guess most importantly, if the board does not approve those changes, then I don't know what the Senate Counsel would do, but likely it would not proceed with the special act. So I don't really have any other comments to make unless any board members have a specific question.
Malcolm?
No questions. I would move to approve the changes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Tom beat you to it, Matt. Any other further discussion at all before I?
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I would just say quickly that when I was legislative liaison for Rep. Fernandez, his office sent a bunch of these back to select board. This is fairly common.
Okay, terrific. That said, by roll call, Matt Fee.
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Aye.
And I vote aye. That's unanimous. Okay, town manager's report.
Okay, so the item we have here is Somerset Needs Area Sewer Extension Project Overview. And we have Dan Sheehan here of Weston and Sampson. And while Dan is coming up, I wanted to just give you a little bit of an overview of this. There are a number of needs areas in the sewer master plan. They are pretty much prioritized, and some of them depend on one another to happen. So we've been having staff meetings about this particular needs area for maybe about a year-ish. And Weston and Sampson has prepared some information about the project, and we've started to develop a potential timeline, which Dan will take us through. It potentially involves seeking funding for design at the 2024 annual town meeting and construction at the 2025 annual town meeting. And those things will be dependent, or will possibly rely on, most likely will rely on, state revolving loan fund financing. So Dan, if I said any of that incorrectly, you can correct me in your presentation, but I would turn it over to him to take us through where we are with this project.
Okay. Thank you. As Lee said, my name is Dan Sheehan with Weston and Sampson Engineers. So tonight we're here to talk about the Somerset Needs Area. You can skip through. Yeah, just a quick agenda as the background, conceptual layout, some project details, costs, schedule, and then some quick questions and discussion if you have anything. So just a quick project background. This whole process started back in 2004 when the town did their first comprehensive wastewater management plan. That developed several needs areas in the town. Then again in 2014, that report was updated to further analyze the needs areas. You had the FMAS report done in 2019, which looked at the waters in the Nantucket, Mattocket, Hummock Pond, the areas looking for nutrients. And then in 2020, we completed the sewer master plan, and the purpose of that was to determine how to connect the various needs areas into the existing system. You get into the next. So this is a map of shows you the needs areas in relation to the existing system. Each of the colored areas is the existing sewer system and tributary to each of the major pump stations. So what we're here to talk about tonight is the Somerset needs area, which is just to the west of the blue area of Surfside Road. In the master plan, we identified some downstream capacity issues that had to be corrected in order to serve the needs areas. And this year, we just completed construction of the Surfside Road pump station, which was upsized from the existing station from 30 years ago in order to handle some of the future flows. So as you can see, the Somerset's the one directly to the west, and then just to the north of that is Hummock Pond North, and then down below is Hummock Pond South. Those three needs areas are all going to go to the new Surfside Road pump station. But in order to service Hummock Pond North and Hummock Pond South, we have to build Somerset area first, because there's a pump station going there. It'll pump all the flow to the new station on Surfside. So this figure is a conceptual layout of how we'd sewer the Somerset area. It'll be a combination of a low pressure sewer with grinder pumps and gravity sewer. All the flow will go to a proposed pump station on Bartlett Road. From there, it will be pumped up Bartlett Road into the new gravity sewer that was installed on Surfside Road. So in this figure, again, this is a conceptual layout. We don't have final survey done. It was just aerial survey. So this is what we could get from that. So the areas in kind of yellow to the west, those are going to be a low pressure system, which means those homes will be on grinder pumps. And that would pump into the low pressure main, which would pump up into the blue lines, which would then flow to the little red box, which is the pump station on Bartlett Road. The blue area is the gravity sewer. And again, those are not, if you see your home on blue, doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to have a grinder pump. So that'll be based on the final design, but this is our conceptual layout for now. I'll go back one real quick. The gravity line on Somerset Lane from Hummock Pond North, that is where the other two needs areas will tie in and come down and flow into the Bartlett Road pump station. And then as far as the pump station goes, that's one of the issues that we're still going to be working on. And one of the bigger cost drivers is the town will need to acquire land for that pump station. Right now that's set at the low spot on Bartlett Road, but the area in green is land bank land. And all the parcels in the area are also privately owned lots. So we're going to have to determine a location of where to either purchase or swap land in order to build the pump station. We've had some preliminary discussions with folks, and that'll be a continuing process if the town decides to move forward with the project. Okay, Erica. So these are just some of the project details real quick. We've got about 25,000 feet of pressure pipe and gravity sewer in the area. So in Somerset, we'll be serving 388 lots, which includes 283 existing lots and 105 potential future lots. Those numbers were developed in the sewer master plan, looking at the potential build out of each of the needs areas. And then in the future, it'll include 262 lots in Hummock North and 226 in Hummock South. Again, we're not going to be, this project will not service those two, the Hummock North and Hummock South areas yet. Those will have to be future projects. Okay, Erica. And then we'll, proposing a pump station on Bartlett Road. The pricing is modeled after the new Surfside Road pump station, which you see right there in that photograph that was recently completed. And then about 4,800 feet of new 10-inch force main running up Bartlett Road. All right, so here's we get to the cost. So the total budgeted cost for the project is $41 million. So the first number is estimated as $26 million for construction. We have a 20% contingency added on of 5.2 million. That's for any unforeseen issues that arise, or things like drainage that the town decides to include in the cost of the project as they're going by something. We have 8.5 for engineering, land and legal costs. So that includes a large number for potentially purchasing a property, as well as legal costs for easements. Anywhere there's a private road, the town will have to take an easement in order to install the sewer lines. We have 0.7 budgeted for police details for public safety, and then we budgeted the 0.7 for grinder pumps. Now we're assuming the town will choose to do the same method you did for Shimo, Nantucket Harbor Shimo Plus area, where the town purchased grinder pumps on a separate procurement and then sold them to the residents for a discounted rate. But so the 0.7 is for the purchase of those grinder pump units. Again, so the total cost of $41 million. Yeah, so then this is a breakdown of the construction costs. So of the 26, so we have 9.3 for the pipeline, 4.8 million for the conveyance system, which is the pump station and the force main. We included 2.4 million for water main extension, which will have to be determined if the Wanacoma Water is going to install water mains in the area. We included footage and cost for water mains and any streets that we're digging to put sewer in the ground, if in fact they want to extend the water system. And then the big number you see at the bottom is surface restoration. That is basically to pave every street that's currently paved with the way we've been paving streets. And it's as you can see, it's a very large item, very large ticket. So during the design, we'd obviously be looking for ways to reduce that, whether we're doing some smaller pipes in the shoulder of the road, or maybe under a bike path if the bike path needs to be redone, things like that. That will be looked at. But as you can see, that's a pretty significant figure. Okay, so if the town does decide to move forward with the project, the first step would be authorize the design in the land, and it should say land and legal funds at the May town meeting in 2024. That would allow the engineer to get started with designing land acquisition, further refining of the costs, public outreach and funding. We anticipate the town will want to use the SRF loan program, which we've used on the last few projects. Currently for Surfside Road in Shimo, the town was able to get 0% financing, which is a great help because the projects had nutrient removal for nitrogen and phosphorus. So the town has been able to successfully get the 0%. And we'd be applying for the same type of funding in August to get on the project evaluation form, to get on the intended use list in the beginning of 25, which will allow the project to move forward. going through the whole schedule, the SRF would be submitting plans and specs in October of 25. And then construction would start in the fall of 26. But I skipped one line, obviously, is in May of 25, you'd have to go back to town meeting to appropriate all the construction funds to actually build the system if you decide to move forward. So if we started in the fall of 26, we have to obviously skip the summertime, so we're not digging in the summertime traffic. Probably take about 2 years, be it the fall of 28 before the system was online and people would be able to connect. And that is it.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? I have one. It seems a little silly. How much land do you need for the pump station? What size lot? Is the minimum?
It's about have you seen the new station? It's about, trying to forget the square foot area of the new one, the new pump station lot. But we're talking about putting a building in similar size.
Yeah.
So it's like a house lot size,
Yeah.
basically.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, 5,000 square feet, somewhere in that range, yeah.
Yeah, it's a small, that's small. My suggestion, thinking about that is we should be looking, is there a lot there that, is for sale, or a house there that's for sale that we could carve this out and use the other part for affordable housing? That would be one way to, get a little bang for our buck there. The other thing I want to check on is, it was, I think what the numbers here, I think we were saying 50% or 60% of the secondary dwellings were going to be potentially built. And that led to the number that we have here.
Yes.
Were there any tertiary dwellings considered here?
No, we went through this whole process back with Andrew. We did the master plan. And his thought was that the tertiary dwellings were more or less putting an apartment in the lower level. So you're already taking an apartment away, room away from the house. So he did not recommend including those. We don't want to oversize the system. If we include every single home, assume 100% of all the tertiaries, you'll oversize the system and it won't work properly. So we're trying to find that balance where you can size it appropriately to make the hydraulics work.
Right, and I understand that. The worry I have is, as we saw that when we start having to, if we have to redo sections of this because they're not big enough, then, in the future, 10, 15 years from now, we're going to be paying for the roads and everything else again. So I would like to just be conservative and, and if you're digging up a dirt road, it's not that big a deal. But if we're digging up a bike path or a tarred road, it's a big deal. So I just want to make sure we've looked at that again, because these areas are going to be where the density is going to go, I believe. Once this is in place, a lot of these houses are going to be larger and they're going to have more bedrooms. And I think there's a fair number of islanders in this area that will take advantage of tertiary and secondary in order to enable their family to stay here, which is a great thing. But we just have to make sure that we're planning for it. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. John, did you want to? John, you have to come to the microphone and identify yourself for the public record. Just no, you have to step up to the mic. Yep, please, for the listening public.
Okay.
Thanks.
Follow up on your question about the pump house. Is it just one on Bartlett Road, or is there another one that's going to be out in the Somerset area?
It's just on Bartlett Road. Yeah, we'll have pump stations in the future needs areas on Hummock North, Hummock South, but we only have one pump station for Somerset on Bartlett Road is where we prefer to put it.
Like where the one is now, or in a different spot?
No, it's on. No, it's not. on
John,
this map.
I'm gonna ask you not to have a conversation with someone. Thanks. So the question, I'll just repeat it. At this point, there is the plan for one pump station for this section that we're proposing out.
We had looked at moving, when you talk about Mizzenmast, we were looking at putting the station at the end of Mizzenmast as potential combining with the Pine Valley station, but we're unable to do that because it's in the report that the land we have to cross has a conservation restriction, which prohibits buildings or pipelines. So we had to abandon that option.
All right, thank you. I have one person online, Billy Cassidy.
Hi, Madam Chair. I wonder if David and this gentleman are aware of what we have been doing with the bike path. I think oddly, we might be able to save a couple of bucks here because Somerset Lane from Somerset Road to Hummock Pond Road, we are acquiring all of the easements for the bike path along there, and we're planning on putting a dry line in there in anticipation of all of this. So that's a substantial amount of work that that shouldn't be replicated. And that's it. I just want to make that point.
Thanks, Billy. So I don't know whether we'll make sure to circle back on that, that there have been some private planning and easement taking for a bike path on Somerset Lane that's now being introduced into the funding cycle. So it was an effort that Billy worked on privately as, so we'll make sure you're on the loop.
That would be very helpful. Yep.
Okay, great. Any other comments, questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Okay, select board reports and comments, preliminary discussion of the tax rate shift. Rob?
Good evening. Welcome to Tax Rate 101. We do this every year where we're sort of refreshing your memory on how this works. And if we can get the presentation up, there we go. So the tax rate hearing is something that we do with you all every year at this time or in the next couple of months. And what the purpose of it, next slide, please, is to determine the tax allocation by classification, the adoption of a residential exemption if you would desire to do that, because that's up to you, and the adoption of a shift from the residential class to the commercial class. Next slide. So to refresh your memory a little bit, the tax levy is the amount of money that is raised by real estate and personal property taxes. In fiscal year 2023, last year, we raised just over $100 million in property tax revenue. The levy amount is distributed by property class based on the proportionate fair and full and fair cash value of each share for each class. Assessors must classify all real property according to use as of each January 1 into one of four different classes: residential, open space, commercial, or industrial. Municipalities decide annually within limits established by statute and the Department of Revenue the percentage of the tax levy that will be paid by each class of real property owners and personal property owners. And the decision is made ultimately at a public hearing, which we will have in the next couple of months. Next slide. So this is what 2023's numbers look like. If you look on the top, where it says LA4 values, those are how the classes broke down in value, and with the total island value at the bottom of just over $31 billion. And then you can see what those percentages are of the total. And then as we go further down the chart, the select board selected a shift of 1.7, which means that the commercial side is paying a little bit more. And then ultimately, you get the shift percentages, which change because you've shifted some from the residential onto the commercial side. And then down at the bottom, we have the residential exemption calculations and how those play out. Next slide, please. This is just a graph of what the levy classes look like. You can see that the big blue line at the top is the residential class, which is by far and away paying most of our tax levy and has for many years. Next slide, please. The other part, or the second part of the tax rate hearing, is deciding on the residential exemption. The residential exemption was enacted by the Commonwealth in 1979 and adopted here locally in 1981. We've had it ever since. The residential exemption is an option under property tax classification, Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5C, that shifts the tax burden within the residential class from owners of moderately or lower valued properties to the owners of vacation homes and higher valued homes and other residential properties that are not occupied primarily by the owner. That's the key here. So the amount of the tax levy paid by the residential class remains the same, but because of the exempted residential valuation, those folks that are receiving the exemption, the levy that is then redistributed over less assessed value. This creates a shift within the residential class that reduces the taxes paid by the homeowners of moderately valued properties and shifts the rest of it onto the non-owner occupied properties, which tend to be the higher valued ones. Next slide, please. This is just a couple of points about the residential exemption, just to keep fresh in your mind. It allows a community to provide an exemption to taxpayers who own and occupy their dwelling as their primary residence. That's also a very important part of the residential exemption. You have to own it and you have to live there as your primary residence. So just a quick point on that. If your property is owned in an LLC, you do not qualify for the residential exemption because technically you are not the owner, the LLC is. So that's how the state looks at that. The exemption may not exceed 35% of the average value in the residential property class. For reference, in 2023, the average residential value, which includes vacant land as well, was just under 2.7 million. And the select board selected a 25% exemption last year, which came out to just under $670,000, which is then deducted off of the assessed value for that parcel. Next slide, please. The loss in value attributed to the exemption is made up by the entire residential class. No free lunches here. For the fiscal year 2023, there were about 2,200 exemptions, representing just under $1.5 billion in exempted value. The residential class is the only class that is affected by changes directly to the residential exemption. So if you adjust the exemption from 25% to some other percentage, it is not impacting the commercial class. And Nantucket is not the only community in the state that offers this. It's offered by approximately 20 other communities, including Boston. We get this question a lot because people come in thinking that it's specifically a Nantucket exemption, but it's not. So this is just a graphic on who benefits, and you can see, as an example, property one there, the lower valued one is only paying 46% of the full what it would be otherwise. And then as you increase in value, the more expensive properties are paying more. Next slide, please. So this is what the shift looks like. We have this is from last year's numbers. We have the classes broken down. The levy percentage of what those classes are originally, and then the shift, which was a 1.7 shift to the commercial, industrial, and personal property, which, as you can see, adjusts the percentage of the levy collected from the residential and shifts a little bit more onto the commercial, industrial, and personal property. Next slide, please. This is pretty much what the share of each class is paying for the total levy. Obviously, the residential share is by far the largest share. Next slide, please. So this was a range of options that I presented last year, and the highlighted one is what was ultimately selected. Sometimes I prefer to have a little guidance from you all on this going forward, because obviously, there are a lot of potential possibilities. So if there are, ideas that you have as far as, what a 30% exemption with a 1.65 shift looks like, or, even a lower exemption with a, whatever if there are options that you want to see, I can put those together and present them at the tax rate hearing, and you can see what those look like. Next slide. So before we go to questions, I have a couple of notes on what fiscal 24 is looking like. Values for fiscal 24 have not been finalized yet. They still need to be approved by the Department of Revenue. This is an ongoing process that is extremely intense, I will say, because everything is looked at, and there are a lot of things that I spend a lot of time on satisfying DOR requests for stuff. Just to make sure that what we're doing is in line with state law and how things work in other communities. It's no secret that in the last couple of years, real estate prices have gone through the stratosphere. So what that is saying for fiscal 24 is values right now are looking like they're increasing on the order of 20 to 25% on average across the island. Some areas are or have increased more than others, like waterfront, for instance, and some areas have not increased as much, perhaps mid-island or some other areas. Assessed valuations for fiscal 24 use sales that took place during calendar year 2022. So 2022 was a pretty hot year for real estate sales. So that's what's factoring into this. The average residential value island-wide was about 2.6, as we just saw in 2023. It is likely, I don't know yet, but it's looking like it's going to be close to 3.2-ish for 2024 at this point. And so that's the average for everybody. We break it down a little bit to year round. Year round, the average value last year, and this is based on the people that have residential exemptions, was just under 1.7 million, and is likely to be around 2 million or somewhere between 2 and 2.2-ish for 2024. We are still calculating commercial values, and that is ongoing, so I don't really have any numbers to report on that. Let's see. In previous years, and certainly in this one, there has been concern expressed to me and in discussions with others that because of the residential value increases, there's concern that their tax bill is going to increase 20 or 25%. That is not the case. Usually what happens when values increase, the tax rate tends to come down. So if your values increase 20%, the tax rate is not going to is going to come down so that your tax bill is not increasing 20%. But I don't know at this point what those numbers are going to be, but I'll present those to you at the tax rate hearing. A lower tax rate. So we talked about when values increase, the tax rate goes down. Just as a point of reference, last year the tax rate was $3.21 per thousand. And that's a drop from the year before where it was $3.74 per thousand. And that during that drop, we saw a similar increase in values that we're seeing now. So I don't know at this point what the tax rate is going to be, but it could go down to the $3 level or perhaps below that, which would offset a lot of these increases. And also, because the residential exemption is based on the average value, that has increased. So the residential exemption amount is increasing with that. So it's sort of keeping pace with the market, but those numbers will be presented at the hearing when we have it. So I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Yes, I think you're right that people are concerned. If you go back to your slide, the blue slide that showed tax rates, residential tax rates over the year, the greatest slope in the curve occurred between 22 and 23. And I've gotten a lot of pushback in the community that why is the tax rate so high?
Well, it's not finalized yet.
Yeah, so I hope that slope between 23 and 24 at least flattens out. And this board had better have a good explanation if it doesn't.
Don?
I have two things. When we evaluate, I'd like to see some options about changing the residential exemption somewhere between 25 and 30, like a 27.5 or 28 kind of options. I also have a question. Is there any way that we could petition as a community to extend a residential exemption to properties that are guaranteed to be rented out year round as an incentive?
That's a good question. I recently learned that Provincetown has a program similar to what you're describing, and I have reached out to the Provincetown assessor, and we are discussing how that went into effect and how that works. It does require some state approvals and some other things, so that, you know, we're sort of, it's almost like a home rule in a lot of ways, but that is an ongoing discussion to see how that might work or affect us.
Okay, great. I'd love to hear more about that option.
So I think Libby said it's a special act. It's a legislative process up to the state. Correct?
Yeah, it is. And it came up several years ago. We had Provincetown here for a kind of a housing summit. And I'm remembering that I think that came up there, and I'm not quite sure why we didn't jump onto it, but it may have been because the transfer fee was getting off the ground at that time, and we didn't want to crowd up too much at the State House with our housing legislation. But certainly that is something to definitely follow up on.
Okay. So it sounds like something. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I would, it's tempting. I've served on a board with members who wanted to give the maximum exemption like right away. And I think we have to be very careful with that. I say this every year because we have a lot of big projects coming, and that is our way to make it affordable for most of our citizens, is to not go too crazy now. We have to look ahead and say, okay, we've got how many hundreds of millions of dollars, and let's make sure that we can do it then when those are coming on to the tax rate. Thank you.
I would agree, Rob. I wouldn't spend any effort on reducing at all. Don't put any time into that. And I also would be inclined not to go all the way to 35% now, given what's coming down the pike. So I don't know how the other members of the board feel, but in terms of the resources of your time, that's where I would lean.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say, Rob, thank you for what's in the packet. As the newest member of the board, it's very helpful to take a look at this. And I would urge any member of the public to look at this. Even if you just look at the wording in the slides, it's very clear on what this is describing. So thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, this was something that sort of came out gradually, and we started presenting this just to educate you all so that you're not slammed at the last minute with a meeting and you're looking at it going, hey, what is this? Why is this number like that? And where this come from and all that. So it's sort of just a refresher and sort of a preliminary discussion for what's going to come in the next couple months.
Thank you. Anything else from the board? Matt?
Yeah, this is like one of my favorite presentations of the year, Rob, just so you know that.
I was going to call you out on it, but you are already jumping in. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any committee reports?
Madam Chair, I would just say that for CPC, all the applications are in, and we're starting our process for interviews and all that. And for Affordable Housing Trust Fund, thank you to the members of the public who applied to be on the focus groups for the year-round deed restriction program. Those are going to commence in a couple weeks. We've been working on the Tucker and the housing office have been working on that with town council and trying to make sure that they are everyone is well represented as much as possible, as well represented in the focus groups, and then move that forward to whatever will be the fruit of those meetings.
Thanks, Tom.
Excuse me. Tomorrow at the Board of Health, we'll be looking at some new water regulations. That has been a lot of input from a lot of people. And if you're interested, I urge you to tune in or come by.
Thanks, Malcolm. Anything else?
Yeah, it's Matt, real quick. BPAC is meeting tomorrow. We haven't met, we met about a month ago. I think one of the issues is what are we gonna do to sort of make the signs consistent and and not give direction to the bikers and the cars. We're gonna try to follow up on that. When I was driving home from the last meeting, I almost hit somebody. I didn't even see them. They came flying across. It was night, no lights on, and luckily I'm old and I drive slow, so I didn't. But I reminded my son, to be careful riding his bike, and it can happen to anybody. So I think, it's very dangerous. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Malcolm McNabb,
Yes, aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Thanks, everybody.
Nice job.